Hi, this is Erica Woods, and I'm going to be presenting on how the Target breach exposed third-party vendor vulnerabilities. Most people have heard about the Target breach, in which customers' credit card information was stolen from Target's cash register system. This happened in November of 2013 during Black Friday, which is one of the biggest holiday shopping events of the year in America. So how did such a significant data breach occur? Here's a visual timeline for both Target and the attackers. Let's take a look at Target's first. So just before the data breach, Target had actually become certified by the Payment Card Industry Data Security Services Council, and they were basically believed to have adequate security mechanisms in place in order to protect their customer credit card information from potential threats or fraud and identity theft. 2 days after the attacks began, however, Target's third party security company, FireEye, alerted them of the malicious activity they were noticing on their network traffic. And basically, Target didn't take any action at this point and didn't investigate the issue further. So, FireEye basically at this point continues to get these alerts that are triggering them that there's some malicious activity happening, but Target didn't respond actually until they were contacted by the Department of Justice, to which they finally did discover the malware and had it shut down, which eliminated the access to the network for the attackers. But this was already after they had extracted all of the data that they needed, so it kind of happened after the fact, so to speak. Now let's switch down to the lower half of the attacker's timeline. So basically, the attackers were able to even gain access into Target's network through social engineering tactics. Basically, Target's company, Fazio Mechanical Services, is a third party vendor that offered heating and cooling services to the stores. And basically, they had an employee who opened up a malicious email containing some form of malware or a virus, and they unknowingly clicked the link and downloaded that onto their computer, and the attackers were able then to spy and steal their login credentials and gain access into that external network. From there, they began to access Target's portal, and they discovered that the point of sale register systems of Target were basically housed on that same network. So at this point, the attackers began to slowly gather the credit card information from this network in order to share over ports. So once they collected all of the data, the attackers were then able to move it and drop it to locations on hacked servers from all over the world via FTP. The research that I conducted showed that they had servers located in Brazil, Russia, and other countries in Eastern Europe. From there, the attackers were able to then retrieve that data, and they were selling that on the black market. So after the data breach, Target faced a lot of brand degradation, and they also had a lot of financial consequences. When we're looking at the impact on the customers, there were about 40 million credit and debit cards stolen from this attack, and that affected about 70 million of Target's customers. Basically, Target then had to cover the cost for those customers to monitor their credit reports on a regular basis. When we're looking at the profits of Target after this data breach, we did see that there was a 46% decrease in the profit, and their stock was also down by about 13%. As a result, Target did try to sort of salvage their reputation and the company's public interest and decided to upgrade their payment terminals to the chip and pin system, and that cost itself was $100 million. On the other hand, the black market was starting to sell each customer credit card stolen from the data breach for about $18 each, and it's said that the hackers from this attack made about $53 million. With regard to the legal aspects of this case, there were over 100 lawsuits filed both by banks and by the victims of more severe identity theft cases. And Target also was in violation with a lot of the individual state laws in which their stores were located, and had to pay a lot of fines and a lot of legal proceedings over the payment the PCI industry and being out of compliance with that, which is ironic because they had just gotten certified, as I mentioned previously. In case you're wondering about what the impact this breach had on Target's third party vendor, Fazio, with the heating and cooling service, they actually didn't incur any financial consequences and pretty much only faced a negative reputation from this breach because they didn't have any sort of contract between Target in terms of maintaining particular security measures. So they kind of got out of this situation without incurring those consequences, which kind of leads more to the point about the lack of security with third party vendors. So there are a number of ways in which this breach could have been prevented and multiple levels of negligence on Target's behalf, frankly. Um, Although they had a third party security software vendor who's called FireEye based out of India, and they did alert them once the attacks began, I think having a chief information officer would have given them a more multifaceted framework to work within when analyzing potential risk and then dealing with internal and partnership vulnerabilities. So this could have been prevented before it even began, essentially. Also, having a local information security staff to do things such as analyzing logs, discovering the malware sooner through monitoring network traffic, maybe that would have given them a stronger protocol or means of action once they did get those alerts. Some obvious tools that could have been implemented are the two-factor or three-factor authentication for the data and network access requests. If they would have made that a requirement from their third-party vendors, I think that it would have been a little bit more difficult for the attackers to get into the system so easily. Of course, then segregating the point of sale systems is another obvious thing. I thought it was really odd that Target housed their point of sale cash registers on the same network as their third party vendors. I mean, that's just kind of asking for an attack. And of course, they could have done things like end to end encryption and just a general inventory of systems and details with their logs in order to prevent this from happening. So this brings me to a larger point regarding this breach. Although Target was responsible for their own lack of protecting their sensitive data and implementing proper security measures, the truth is they're not alone. There are many companies that are starting to outsource to smaller vendors, and they are subjected to the same vulnerabilities. In fact, if you take a look at the companies and organizations that I have listed here, every single one of these organizations has been affected by a third party data breach. And in fact, statistics show that 65% of companies sharing customer data with a third party vendor will subsequently experience a breach through that partnership. So it's something that is happening and it's unavoidable. So, with regard to third party vendor risk prevention, I think it's very important for companies to begin to make a list of the tasks that they currently outsource and to identify all of the vendors that are associated or connected with fulfilling those tasks. I think that will pretty much raise awareness to a lot of companies on their real network and where they need to extend and place security measures so that they can prevent breaches from happening. I think it's also important to know the third party vendors' information security plans in order to see if those standards are equivalent to the company itself or if there needed to be some other policy written up in order to ensure that both parties feel that they are adequately supported and protected. Additionally, understanding and knowing regulation and compliance. For example, Target's payment card industry, or if it were healthcare, it would be the HIPAA regulations. Knowing where the third party vendor stands with being in compliance with those standards and also communicating the needs of the company in order to make sure that there is no gray area for that type of potential threat. Additionally, it's really important to know where your data is traveling to. Some cases where there may be some cases where the data may be developed in one country and transmitted to another. And if something were to happen along the way through that transmission, through like a data center, for example, companies would be subjected to three separate legal systems, and that can just open up a whole new can of worms. So basically, you want to be aware of each vendor and their location and how that affects your data as it travels. So really zoning in on those details of where's your data, who's handling it, and how is it maintained. Additionally, privilege access is something that was a problem for Target in terms of determining what network the third-party vendor should be operating on and what else is housed on those servers, because that makes it easy for attackers to come in and get access to one system and then gain entry into a more secure um, level of data. And then additionally, having those regular patches and vulnerability detects is quite obvious and things that need to happen, both for third-party vendors and for the company itself. And then lastly, I think service level agreements are really important and should mandate that third parties comply with the company's security policies. So if they can't comply or if they won't address the certain demands that a company has, then perhaps they may need to find a different third-party vendor, because obviously we know with Target that it's not worth it if you have a company who's not willing to take on and comply with the same security standard and policies that you do as a company. And then for my final slide before I conclude, I thought it was really helpful to include the SANS critical security controls list, because it was something that was designed by the federal government, and I also think it's a great guideline for preventing and detecting attacks. As it shows here, there's topics covered for privacy, for threat and risk analysis, network and data access, which are all issues that Target faced, unfortunately, and things like mobile device action plans, backup business data information, etc. I mean, basically, businesses can't rely on a single security tool or process to prevent data loss or breaches or harm. I think it's important for use guides like the critical controls to implement layers of security to help design a more thorough security plan. Of course, continual communication always needs to happen between the companies and the third party vendors. And I think there needs to be a mutual interest in maintaining the integrity of the data that is transmitting between these two. And I think it's important to have ongoing assessment of external resources and internal devices, monitoring the hacking techniques that are out there and working with communities to sort of stay in the loop of security awareness and things that are surfacing as time progresses. We know that hackers can gain more skill, so just trying to be aware of those things and constantly revisiting the plan is something that needs to happen. When looking at the critical security controls, I think it's obvious that Target's breach could have been prevented, and I think that the steps taken by the attackers could have been stopped long before it reached the point that it did. So hopefully we'll see more research coming out and more corporations starting to sit down and develop these policies with third-party vendors. Lastly, here's my reference page, and I'm sorry I went over on the time. I had so much information. I really enjoyed working on this presentation, and I learned a great deal. I hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.